Lucky enough to be joined now by Sports Illustrated senior writer Pat Forde. Pat, it's great to see you. Want to talk about this long-form piece that you wrote at the beginning of March Madness about Hoosier hysteria. One of the things I love that you said in there is that this is the state to do it, to embrace this March Madness. I think you said they're going to pour their hoops-loving soul into this over the next couple of weeks, and we've seen a little bit of that already. And I know starting my career in Indiana and driving out to some of these high school barns in places like Elkhart and Goshen and South Bend, your piece really resonated with me because I understand the soul of the state when it comes to basketball. I'm just curious, some of the things that you learned that maybe you weren't as familiar with over the course of really getting into the history associated with the state and basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Carolyn, it's the only place really to put on this kind of tournament, and given the heritage and the history and the long love affair they've had in Indiana. And my first job out of college was covering Indiana high school sports in the southern part of the state. And so I first got a little bit of a taste of it then. And the second game I ever covered was in a sold-out gym with 9,000 people. And it was like, this is crazy. This is unbelievable. And you start digging back into it, and I mean, this goes back a long way. And that was kind of the point of the story, is like, this is not the first time Indiana has thrown a big tournament, okay? You go back, they started the high school tournament in 1911. It's the first state to have one. By 1914, they had 38 teams coming to Bloomington and playing 37 games in 2 days. And it just grew from there. They built Hinkle Fieldhouse, which was then Butler Fieldhouse, to 15,000 seats in 1928, and at the time it was the biggest gym in America. They didn't build it for Butler for the demand, they built it for the high school tournament. And so you go back that far, and there was 15,000 people watching basketball before the Depression. It's really pretty amazing, and the small towns still feel very strongly about the sport and about their teams and their place in it. And so do the big cities, the teams in Indianapolis, the teams in up near the Chicago region. So it's really a statewide love affair with basketball. And Indianapolis is definitely a place that can handle having 68 teams and playing 67 games.
In some ways, they feel frozen in time. I mean, I tell the stories more often than you might think about driving into Amish country and getting trapped behind a horse and buggy and pulling into a high school barn and having thousands and thousands of people there. And I think unless you're lucky enough to be able to witness something like that, I mean, Hoosiers is obviously, a huge movie, but unless you can really see it and feel it, I don't know if you truly grasp it, but you do when you read your piece. And the other thing that I took away from your piece was just how interwoven sports and basketball was with the politics over the last century as well. I mean, it seems like there were a lot of complicated moments in Indiana's history that met at the intersection between sports and what was happening for us as a country.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's one thing that really kind of, I guess, resonated with me when I was researching this is, Indiana in the 1920s was a hotbed for Ku Klux Klan activity, up to and including they had the ear of the governor. They had control of the state legislature. And so there was a lot of that sort of thing going on, although a lot more of it was more anti-Catholic than pure racism at the time. But while that's going on, in 1929, 1930, 1931, the state of Indiana has probably the first great black basketball player, Big Dave DeJournette from Washington, Indiana, a small town in the southwest part of the state with a very small black population. So it's not like it was really like anything you could logically expect to happen. But here was the thing. He could play, and the people loved him. And so they came to watch him play. He led the team to the 1930 state championship. He led the victory parade back on the fire trucks into Washington, Indiana. And it was kind of interesting the way, they put race aside because they loved basketball so much. 1955, Oscar Robertson leads Crispus Attucks all-black team to a victory over an all-black Gary Roosevelt team for the state title. And that was a big deal. There's 15,000 people in Hinkle Fieldhouse for that. So it wasn't like people turned their backs on black players because they're black. They're like, no, if you can play basketball, we love you.
It's a really great piece, and I encourage anybody who might be watching this to go check it out on si.com because you really dig into the history of it. And it's fascinating to really learn about it and how we got to this point. I mean, cut to a tournament this year that is obviously unlike any other. We've had so many surprises, and now that the Sweet 16 is set, we have a little bit more of an idea of what to expect heading into the weekend. And another piece that you posted to SI, you really highlight that the Pac-12 is having a moment here. How surprising is that for you? Is this a long time coming for them to maybe get the respect that they deserve, having representation of what's essentially now 25% of the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big moment for the Pac-12. It's been a bit of a downtrodden league. Their football has not been up to par. Basketball has kind of been overlooked and underappreciated. They haven't had a national champion since 1997. Doesn't mean they haven't had good teams, but they haven't had an elite team in that long. So, yeah, I think this is great. I think it's good for the tournament. This has always been a national tournament. And if you've got the West Coast checked out, that's not good. Let's have all the regions involved and have everybody have teams to get excited about. And with 4 teams out of 16, they've got a lot to be excited about, more than any other conference there. And then you throw in Gonzaga on top of that. So, they performed extremely well. I didn't expect to see UCLA getting this far. I sure didn't expect to see Oregon State getting this far. I thought Oregon and USC could be here, but still, they are playing with house money right now for the Pac-12.
Has anything changed your mind about Gonzaga? I mean, heading into the tournament, everybody had them. You still think that they will ultimately get it done? I
do. I'm sticking with them there. They were my pick beforehand, certainly still my pick. Their second round game wasn't easy against Oklahoma, and it won't be easy from here on out, but that's the way the tournament's supposed to be. I think Baylor certainly exists as a threat. Alabama exists as a threat. Michigan has done a great job overcoming a key injury. And I say watch out for Loyola Chicago, too. There's still some teams out there that can challenge Gonzaga for sure.
For some of these other conferences, Big Ten, for example, or some of these traditional powerhouses that normally send multiple teams to the Sweet 16, I mean, is there a little bit of wiggle room in such an unusual year-end tournament to chalk up results as maybe, not quite as embarrassing as they've been? Or is there really no room for that with just the level at which some of these big schools operate, the expectations that are there for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. They obviously, you get caught up in the moment and you're like, this is great, this is terrible. And sometimes you lose the context of the season. And it's been a season of completely unprecedented complications and difficulty. I still think for the Big Ten, this is still really bad. You bring 9 teams in, you have 1 team left at this point. The Illinois loss, well, they got a bad draw, I think, Loyola, but Ohio State's loss, Purdue's loss, ouch. Those were really, really bad losses, I thought, for the league. Iowa not even being competitive against Oregon was not good. So, given the fact that they had gotten the attention all season as by far the best league, for them to be sitting here with 1 team left, that's an embarrassment. Now, again, COVID, a lot of strange things have happened. We've seen some things within the tournament. I mean, VCU didn't even get to play a game. So you have to take some things with a grain of salt. But in terms of the here and now, rough time for the Big Ten.
Unfortunately, on the women's side, instead of breaking down matchups, what we find ourselves talking about is just the inequity that exists in college sports, in this sport in particular. I saw one headline that said, March misogyny. You have women's college basketball coaches coming out and essentially thanking the NCAA for exposing just how difficult this is. You have a daughter that's a college athlete. What do you think the NCAA can do, if anything, to further right this ship? I mean, we all saw the video that went viral, and then the issue was quickly corrected, right? And all of a sudden the women have a weight room. But, how big of a problem is this? And what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I'm of 2 minds about this. One, I mean, that was just a ridiculous flop by the NCAA. I mean, I don't understand, where the smart people are supposed to be there of like, we're putting on these 2 tournaments. They need to be as close to the same as they can be in every possible way. Every amenity the guys get, the women should obviously get. Every chance, every opportunity, everything about it that is there to help their performance should be equal, absolutely equal. Now, do I think this is a sign that the NCAA doesn't care about women's sports? No, I don't. I think it's an incompetent organization, mostly. Here's what I would say, Carolyn. The 2 things in America that have done the most for women's athletics are Title IX and the NCAA. You go to the Olympics and you watch America kick everyone else's butt in women's sports, especially women's team sports. What does it all trace back to? Those two things. And the fact that the NCAA and each college has a lot of sports for women. They give them their opportunities. They get good coaching. They get opportunities to play national schedules, good competition, good facilities. All that sort of thing exists. I mean, they may not be equal to the men, but they exist so much better than other places in the globe. I mean, are you kidding me? You go and you want to compare women's sports opportunities here versus the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, Russia, Eastern Europe, some other places, Africa, South America. It's not even close. So the NCAA can't even tell its own story correctly. If they could get out there and say, hey, these are all the things we're doing. We screwed this one up. We screwed it up badly. There's no doubt about that. But here's the big picture. Let's keep that in mind. They can't even get their own message out right, though.
I wonder, this pandemic has seemingly ripped the face off of the NCAA and exposed just a lot of fundamental challenges that exist within the organization that you're highlighting. And essentially, I don't want to disparage Mark Emmert, but like a lack of leadership, a lack of vision, a lack of execution, I think would maybe be fair to say. Is that fair to say? I mean, that they need to really figure out a way to rethink as an organization how they are approaching some of these issues?
Yeah, you're too nice to say it. I'll say it. And Mark Emmert's been a terrible leader. He's been an incompetent leader, I think, of the NCAA. And I think it's fair to say that. And the fact that they put up with him is an indictment of the college sports system, because basically it's just the presidents who are just like, yeah, just keep him there as our punching bag. The athletic administrators don't like him. The coaches don't like him. The athletes don't respect him. But that association changes so slowly, clumsily, unwillingly all the time that Emmert's basically the perfect guy for them, because he'll resist. He'll drag his feet. He's a bureaucrat. He can find excuses. He'd much rather talk to the presidential side of campus than the athletic side anyway. But they absolutely need better leadership. They need smarter, more caring, more personable leadership across the board. There's no doubt about that. And will it happen? I don't know. I mean, we've been saying some of these things for so long. Now, name, image, and likeness is coming. That's going to happen. We'll see what form it takes. But the NCAA was dragged to that at gunpoint, basically. Immediate eligibility transfer is coming. People are up in arms about that, but I think that's fair. It may be a mess for a while, but I think that's going to work out. So change is coming, but they need to change leadership as well.
Yeah, those are trains that aren't going to be stopped. And it's unfortunate you raised such a good point that a lot of the good that has happened as a result of Title IX and some of these programs that are available to female athletes are being overshadowed by complete incompetence. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about Rick Pitino. I mean, he said the other day that he's in heaven at Iona, has no interest in getting back into the big school game. Do you think that that's true? Do you think his days of trying to be in that world are over and that he is actually happy where he is?
We'll see. Look, Rick has said he's happy at every job he's ever had, and he's changed jobs a lot. Now, I do think he was going to stay at Louisville for the rest of his career if he could have. So he could be at that stage of his career like, okay, I don't need to move around. But also knowing him and seeing him coach in this tournament and being reminded how good he is, I mean, they had Alabama so uptight, so nervous, so scared to death because they had him scouted well, they were performing well against him. And I think Nate Oates, just seeing Rick Pitino on the other bench, made him uptight. That give Rick another year or two where he can get in the tournament, but he's a 13 seed, he's a 12, he's a 14. He doesn't have a chance to win it. And he might sit there and say, nah, I want one more shot at a ring.
Do you want to see him with one of those big programs? I mean, he is so talented. What he's been able to do there and the way that he kind of coaches up this young talent?
Well, I mean, it's basically up to whatever school would hire him, up to their appetite for taking on baggage. He's got as much baggage as anybody could have out there. There's still, I believe, a half-season suspension waiting for him from the NCAA whenever the Louisville infractions case gets done. If you want to talk about problems with the NCAA, they never get any of these cases completed. That'll probably be served next year. But, yeah, they have another good year. They win 25 games at Iona. They go to the tournament. Somebody out there is going to say, we'll take him.
Hey, just before I let you go, you got any early Kentucky Derby picks? I know you only have a 1, 2, 3, 1,000 things happening right now, but are you paying attention to the ponies at all?
Well, I've been paying a little bit of attention, just enough to know that Life is Good, it was supposed to be the favorite, is injured and off the Triple Crown trail. So the name out there right now is Essential Quality, Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner. He'll be the favorite as of now, but we'll start having some of the bigger prep races, and we'll go from there. And you know what? My picks are never good anyway.
Pat, you're the best. We look forward to writing everything from the rest of the tournament, reading everything that you're writing. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Carolyn.